UFC 300, who's going to headline? I love that that's even a talk. I don't ever hear that in our sport. And I've shared with you guys, like Red Panty Night is still real. George Masvidal was the second biggest draw in the sport. Anybody named Diaz, meaning Nick or Nate, was number 3. Like, these are true things. One thing that they all have in common is none of them are champion. Another thing they have in common, they didn't win their last fight. It's one of these really interesting spots where the guys that know how to maneuver seem to maneuver outside of the boxes that you continually think that they must be in. And I only bring it to you so you can observe it. Then you have other guys who move the needle, who are stars, who are draws, who are possible to be on the cover of the next video game, just by example. And of that category, as much as fighters dream about that, as much as they want that to be them, of the 767 athletes under contract, 5 even know that's a thing, and 5 vie for that position. 5 of them want to be the top draw. 5 of them focus on being the main event no matter who else is on the card. 5 of them want to be asked the most questions at the press conference. 5 of them, when they come through the curtain to get onto the scale at the real weigh-in or the ceremonial weigh-in, are paying attention to how loud the pop of the crowd is and juxtapose that against their fellow competitors. The other guys don't even know this is a thing. They don't even know this is happening. They have no chance of taking over Red Panty Night if they don't even know that that's a contest with its own set of rules that will be explained to you by nobody. You must figure it out on your own. They have no chance. They want to be great jabbers, so they'll go watch tape and they'll break a guy down. They'll try to figure out his jab. And then the really smart ones will go and see what he did before he threw the jab. Not just turning it over, shoulder blocking here, and turning the thumb down. What did he do before it? What kind of fake did? Those are the really smart ones. But they'll never do it when it comes to who moves the needle or who the biggest draw is. They will never do it with who's fighting on Super Bowl weekend, which is a perennial weekend in MMA. Who's headlining International Fight Weekend, which is a massive time in MMA. In some parts of the world, the New Year's Eve show, which, by the way, doesn't even have to fall on New Year's Eve. We'll just call it the New Year's Eve show because it's somewhere near that date. I mean, just by example. But I do hear people talking about 300. I appreciate that. I appreciate that to a degree. Now, who's going to headline 300? And I will tell you first and foremost, the storylines aren't there yet. I don't believe the storylines are there yet. Let me just show you a great example. I don't think it's on accident that Strickland and Duplessis are going to fight in January. I don't think that's on accident. And whether you then have the rematch of Strickland versus Izzy, or you have the feud this thing was melting airwaves. And I'm talking about Duplessis versus Adesanya. People didn't know how to respond. They didn't know how to weigh in. They brought in Africa. They had a white guy. They had a black guy. This made people so uncomfortable, they couldn't turn away. And that was one of the great feuds that never got resolved. And I don't think it's an accident that Duplessis and Strickland are going to fight that prior to 300. But that doesn't mean that fight can come together. Piera had an idea about fighting Izzy for the millionth time and doing it at 205 pounds, and that would be 300. And it's not the world's worst idea. I'm just sharing for you. I'm not convinced that these storylines are done. I'm not convinced that something is penciled in here. Let me give you a great one. You hear a level of ridiculousness thrown around 300. Now, every now and then in this sport, we could have some fun. And Dana White specifically, it's about 10 years in between fun. Everything else, Dana, it's in a column, it's in a lane, it's in a box. It's for a reason. But then you'll get a James Toney. And you get a CM Punk. And every now and then you get to just have fun. But with 300 coming up, there's something about it being 300 that falsely tells the audience it's an attraction. And therefore, we're willing to get off course for the attraction of the evening. And I just don't agree that you have any data to support that. I don't agree that the once or twice in 2 decades that we get out of our policies, get out of our lanes, is going to be used for such a perennial event. In fact, I think it would be the opposite. For a perennial event, we're going to show even more of an integrity to what it is that we do. We're not trying to bring in one-offs. We're not looking for a spectacle. We're looking to showcase what it is we do. I think. That's what I believe. But because it tells people's minds that there's no rules, the only rule is bringing in more attention. I even heard talk of Ronda Rousey coming back. And this was good fun. It was clickbait, but it wasn't doing the clicks people thought. It was one of these rumors that they actually killed pretty quickly because the return that was speculated just wasn't there. But the theme of the narrative is interesting to me. Why you would think we're going to do something wild or crazy. Here, look, let me give you a great example. One thing that Dana White will not do, and you could go through 20 plus years, and if you looked real close, you could make my statement a non-absolute statement. That's true, but it'd be hard. One thing he will not do, doesn't have anything to do with, is something that doesn't lead to something else. It's always chess. We're going to hold this match because for this guy or for this guy, we go in this direction and we build something bigger and we just keep on doing that, right? That is the problem with the Ronda match. That would be headed nowhere. It would be fun, but if you're going to have fun on a level of silliness, if you're just looking for eyeballs, your answer is George Masvidal versus Justin Gaethje for the BMF belt. There's not a second answer. There's not, okay, are we scrambling up Conor and where's Chandler? And what are we going to do? It's not that. Okay, Duplessis and Adesanya, and by the way, are they willing to go back to this African angle? It's not that. If you wanted one in the hand and you're not looking to parlay it, you're not looking to bounce or go anywhere, you just want guys where the world's going to watch and you find the title important, you get Masvidal, you get Gaethje, you do it for the BMF belt. That's not going to happen. So I'm sharing with you by telling you that's not because you all just went, oh my God, that would be a really big night. But it isn't going to happen. Why wouldn't it happen, Chael? For the reasons that I previously stated, it doesn't take you anywhere. It doesn't go anywhere. That belt does not have a lineage. They're not within the same weight class. George is not returning. In fact, he's retired. Gaethje is a #1 contender. It's one of these things that it's just not the way that it gets done. And how much of it is the storyline in the big fight leading the 300 as opposed to the 300 leads the storyline and the fight? That would be anybody's guess. And you can go ahead and throw your shots out here now. It used to be the most coveted card of the year was Super Bowl weekend. Now, in all fairness, we never had any grand slams on Super Bowl weekend. That was the one that people thought. That was the one that was getting the focus. That's where you bring the big guns out for. Business showed that for whatever, it wasn't as big as we thought it was going to be. That's fine because we had something called International Fight Weekend. And International Fight, that was the one. That's true. But most recently, and off the top of my head, but I'm pretty good at this, it was Max Holloway for the umpteenth time against Volkanovski for the umpteenth time. And not to mention, I should add, that wasn't the one that they went for. It was a last-minute replacement. So when you start to look at it from that regard, is it the fighters that are going to draw 300? Do we have to have the perfect things because we have a 300, or will 300 then draw in the fights? And I just don't believe that this is all wrapped up. I don't know that it's even time to start targeting. I had it thrown at me, Islam Makhachev, and I think that Islam's a great one, but it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work Islam Makhachev, right? 2 fighters in history can draw on their own. Mike Tyson, Oscar De La Hoya. I think the list needs amended to add Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. But the point I'm trying to say is you don't get, who's headlining 300? You go, Islam Makhachev. No, Islam versus who? And a lot's coming about. Is O'Malley going to win that fight? Is O'Malley going to beat Vera? Because that's going to be a massive fight by the time that comes off. I watched the press conference last week. Cheeto went out and did everything right. O'Malley brings the best out of Cheeto. Cheeto's a very interesting guy, but he doesn't always show it. He shows it with O'Malley. I'm just bringing that to you for example. What happens in that match? Sean Strickland, Du Plessis, not a fight I would have predicted for you. And for very good reason. I have ears. I was told it would be Chimaev, but all of a sudden it's not. And it feels like that one's being rushed. If that's true, why? And I do think that Adesanya is the answer. And I think Adesanya in the rematch with Sean, or Adesanya in one of the great feuds ever, as short as it lasted, it had as much heat as any feud I've ever seen. I'm talking about Du Plessis. So where are we going to go with 300, right? I mean, it's just food for thought. And my insertion here of being the smartest guy in the room isn't actually to tell you or give you an idea. I'm just going to hypothesize that whatever it is, it's not done yet. We don't have those stories yet. There's still a lot of room there. There's still some things that are forming and moving parts. And as I stated earlier, you got 776 guys under contract. They all want to be stars, but only 5 of them even know that that's a game and a competition in and of itself. There's not a gym you can sign up for, pay them $114 electronically, deposit out of your account, show up with a mouthpiece and a rash guard. There's not a gym you can go to. There's not a manager that you can call and promise to give him 10% of your hard-earned money and he's going to put a strategy together. There's not a media member out there. There's nobody that you can go to learn how to do that. It's a game in and of itself that most don't even know is existing. It just happens around them. It just happens around them and they had fun. But you do got a few players out there. And you do have a few players that are going to be smart enough to not wait for the story in the 300 to find them. They're going to look at 300 and they're going to go find it. Who those guys are and what their angle are hasn't yet been revealed. But there's a reason Izzy didn't want the immediate rematch. There is. What is that answer? You could guess. There's a reason that the Ronda clickbait went away pretty quickly. And there's a reason that one of the biggest fights you could make, and they would agree to it today, is Masvidal versus Gaethje for the BMF title. All of which are not going to happen, aren't even going to be at the table discussed for what's going to happen. So we can wait for your phone to ring. That's generally how you guys do it. You would generally wait for your phone to ring. Or you could be proactive, get in front of it, and steal the headlining act of the biggest card of all time. But something tells me you 776, none of you are going to attempt that.